Evening, everybody. I think we're about 7 o'clock now. Welcome to the Planning Committee on this, the 11th of October. Welcome to councillors, members of the public, members of the esteemed press, and of course officers tonight present here. Okay, to start the item 1, do we have any apologies? Apologies from Councillor Jones. I also have an apology from Simon Jones, substituted by Councillor Panter. Is that correct? Do you have any further apologies? No further apologies. Okay. Thank you. Brings us on to item 2, declarations of interest. Does anybody on the Planning Committee have any declarations of interest here tonight? I'll take that as a yes, they haven't. Okay. Which brings us to item 3, minute of the previous meeting. For those that have had the agenda pack and read that, do we agree? Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the planning obligation for houses on a former site at Silverdale, Station Road, Silverdale, I've been asked by the local councillor, and I think it was agreed that we keep an update, a regular update, whether it's every meeting or whatever, but really it should be on every meeting. I thought we'd agreed on that, like both Cottage and Despool. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I'll just check that with officers.
Can we agree on that, Mr.
Yeah, we can agree on that. Any further comments on the minutes, although we agree that there was a true and accurate record and we can move on with proceedings tonight? I'll take that by absence of any further comments as sent. Thank you. That brings us on to item 4 of the agenda, application for major development, Baldwin's Gate Farm, Newcastle Road, Baldwin's Gate, Richborough Estates. I believe there's a presentation on this one. Okay, thank you very much. Would you like to start? Thank you.
Chair. So this is an outline planning application for up to 200 dwellings at Baldwin's Gate Farm with details of access for consideration. The site is located outside of, but immediately adjoins the existing village settlement boundary. And you can see the site edged in red on the screen there. Although an indicative site layout has been submitted to show how the site may be developed, layout, scale, appearance and internal access arrangements are all matters reserved for subsequent approval, and therefore it's not considered necessary to comment in detail on the layout submitted. With regard to the principle of development, you will be aware of the considerable strength of feeling of some of those who object to this scheme, particularly around policy HG1 of the neighbourhood plan, which was made in January 2020. We've received a great deal of correspondence from the Parish Council and the Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group, both directly and through their planning consultants. I understand that planning committee members have been written to directly, and you'll no doubt hear more on this tonight, but the officer advice to you, as set out in the report, after giving considerable thought to the points raised, is very clear. The correspondence we have received seeks to persuade us that we should give determinative weight to the neighbourhood plan in this application and refuse the application on the basis of a conflict with policy HG1. The representations seem to be saying that we've arrived at a view that policy HG1 is out of date because of a mistake that we've made in interpreting and applying the National Planning Policy Framework. So on the screen there, it's probably a bit difficult. You can maybe see the one closest to you, but the text of the 2 most relevant paragraphs of the the NPPF are displayed there for you to read. The representations seem to assume that because the council can demonstrate a 7.3-year housing land supply, then the local development plan, including the neighbourhood plan, cannot be considered to be out of date. That is not correct. Footnote 8 of the NPPF uses the words "this includes," and therefore it's not a closed list. Housing land supply is just one consideration in determining whether or not the local development plan is out of date. For the reasons set out in the report, our advice to you is that the local development plan, for the purposes of considering this application, is out of date. The representations also seem to be saying that the fact that the local plan and core spatial strategy are out of date does not render policy HG1 of the neighbourhood plan out of date. Again, the committee report deals with this. The correct approach in law is made clear in the Paul Newman Holmes case, which was approved by the Court of Appeal as recently as January 2021. That requires the decision taker to take the most important policies and place them in a metaphorical basket, and then decide whether or not that basket as a whole is out of date. And for the reasons set out in the report, the advice to you is that the basket of policies is out of date. The effect of this is that the tilted balance in paragraph 11D of the NPPF must be applied. That paragraph is also shown on the screen. That is to say, any harm associated with the proposal must significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So, and I repeat there that any harm associated with the proposal must significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. Officers have carefully considered whether paragraph 14 of the NPPF, again shown on the screen, and the neighbourhood plan can assist here. But because the neighbourhood plan was adopted more than 2 years ago, paragraph 14 cannot be applied in this case. Officers have considered all of these representations very carefully. Legal advice has been taken, including external legal advice, and the report highlights how the NPPF is to be applied in light of recently decided cases dealing precisely with these points on the tilted balance. There are no objections from any technical consultees, and subject to the imposition of conditions, the scheme is considered acceptable in terms of impact on the character and appearance of the countryside, highway safety, ecology, residential amenity, flood risk, drainage and heritage. The development would result in some local impact on the character and appearance of the area, and there would be a loss of best and most versatile agricultural land. However, there is a need for a minimum of 7,000 homes over the emerging plan period. And with no affordable units completed within the borough during the most recent monitoring period of 2020-21, it is the case that affordable housing is required. This development would deliver a mix of market housing and affordable housing in a sustainable location. And it's also accepted that the new roundabout junction with the A53, Newcastle Road and Woodside would result in an improvement to highway safety. Other positive impacts are set out in the report under the 3 areas that government say comprise sustainable development, namely economic, social and environmental benefits, and they're displayed on the screen for you now. Therefore, in reaching my recommendation to this committee, I'm professionally bound to recommend approval because the limited harm to character and appearance of the area and the limited loss of best and most versatile agricultural land is not enough to significantly and demonstrably weigh against the presumption in favour of sustainable development, including the highway improvements and the significant contribution that this scheme would make to the borough's identified housing need and the much needed provision of rural affordable housing.
Just Colleen, before I go on to the next part of this meeting, just a few housekeeping rules. As my capacity as chairman, I've agreed tonight that speakers will have 5 minutes to give their presentation. I felt that because of the complexity of this particular application and all the issues that surrounded it, I felt that it was more transparent and democratic for all speakers to have that extra 2 minutes. It might not seem a lot, but when you're up there giving a speech, it can mean an awful lot in terms of your points and getting those across. I am going to take the objectors first to this application, followed by the supporter. I believe there's 2 objectors speaking tonight. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's the parish council and an object.
Okay, that's Mr. Oppenheimer and Mr. Walker. Are they here tonight? Okay. When you give your speeches tonight, there's no course to interact with the members of the committee. You just give that your version of events, and that you take no further part in the proceedings other than observer tonight. Please, a little bit of best practice to the crowd. I may be overstating this point, but if there's any barracking or any disturbance whatsoever, I shall empty the room. This is so we can conduct the council business for tonight. So I'm hoping that you're going to be on your best behaviour, and we can go on to hearing the first speakers tonight, and that's Mr. Oppenheimer. Would you like to come up and give your speech? You've got 5 minutes. You'll be reminded after 4 minutes with 1 minute to go by our clerk at the end. Start when you're ready. Yes, press the red button to start and finish accordingly in your own time.
Right, I'm the chairman of the Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group, and I'm here to tell you why this application should be refused. The proposed development is not supported by the relevant policies of the Neighbourhood Plan. These policies include a policy HG1, which says that new development will be permitted in sustainable locations.
Mr. Oppenheimer, would you mind just tilting the mic towards you, please? That's it, yeah.
These policies include policy HG1, which says new development will be permitted in sustainable locations. These include within the village envelope of Baldwin's Gate, and development must not involve the lost and most versatile agricultural land. This proposal is outside the village envelope and would involve the loss of 11 hectares of BMV land. It is not a sustainable location as defined by policy HG1. It is therefore in conflict with the relative NDP policy. Planning law and government guidance say clearly and undeniably that our NDP forms part of the borough's current adopted development plan, and that NDP policies take precedence over the newer until the newer policies of a local plan are adopted. The relevant policies of the NDP must be properly applied. The aim of our neighbourhood plan and policy HG1 is to preserve rural character while allowing for appropriate development. The proposal is not appropriate and is unsustainable, not least because it vastly exceeds the housing need for the neighbourhood area as identified in the NDP. A government commissioned report for the NDP says that Baldwin's Gate is at the tipping point of losing its rural character. This dense concentration of development on the edge of the village would do permanent and irreparable harm to the rural character of Baldwin's Gate. Our 3 parish councils are aware of the intentions of landowners in the neighbourhood area. If this application is permitted, the floodgates will open for further development beyond the village envelope and in every rural village in the borough. It will unleash a tsunami that your committee will be powerless to hold back. Your officers' reports contain serious fundamental inaccuracies and misleading statements. In particular, the officers want you to believe that the policies of a neighbourhood plan go out of date when it reaches 2 years old. This is because they want you to believe that the local development plan, which includes our NDP, has no relevant policy on the location of development in our neighbourhood area. Urban Vision, our planning consultants, have explained to your officers that there is nothing in national planning policy or national planning practice guidance to say that an NDP's policies go out of date when they reach 2 years old. They remain valid until withdrawn or replaced. The NDP's policy HG1 and housing target do not support either the proposed location nor the level of development in Baldwin's Gate. The independent examiner's report on the NDP says that the plan places no cap or limit on the number of homes that can be provided within the Baldwin's Gate village envelope. I conclude that policy HG1 will not lead to the NDP promoting less development than set out in the local plan, as required by paragraph 29 of the framework. Current monitoring shows that our 3 parishes have been delivering and exceeding their housing target for the plan period of 2013 to 33. Now hold on to those thoughts, because in a moment the officers will try to persuade you differently. Fear of an appeal against a refusal is not a material planning consideration and is not a valid reason to permit.
1 minute.
The officers have applied national policy incorrectly. Our neighbourhood plan has been adopted by your borough council. It is part of the statutory development plan and it is not out of date. There is a relevant policy, NDP policy HG1. The borough does have a 5-year housing land supply. In fact, it is 7.3 years. Therefore, the relevant policy must be applied. This is what the law says. If the relevant policy is not applied, your decision will be unlawful and consequences will follow. You have the power to refuse this application and thereby save the Borough Council from opening it up to the consequences of making an unlawful decision. For all of these reasons, this speculative application should be refused. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Oppenheimer. I now invite Mr. Neil Walker to come and give his speech. Same protocol applies, Mr. Walker. You've got 5 minutes and you'll be reminded after 4 minutes that you've got a minute left.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a member of the Whitmore Parish Council. This application should be refused. The Borough Council currently classifies Baldwin's Gate Village as a sustainable location. However, a government commissioned report for the neighbourhood plan says that Baldwin's Gate is at risk of becoming more unsustainable due to the facilities failing to evolve to keep up with the settlement's growth. In other words, it is borderline sustainable. No new community facilities have been provided in Baldwin's Gate since 1968, when there were 213 dwellings. Baldwin's Gate has no village centre. Our neighbourhood plan steering group looked for ways to create a village centre and provide for more facilities, but found it impossible due to the constraints of existing transport routes and piecemeal growth. Since 1968, dwelling numbers have grown to 442. The proposed 200 would raise that number to 642, a tripling in the size with no new facilities. How could the village still be considered as sustainable? A family or an employed person cannot live in Baldwin's Gate without at least 1 car, more often 2. The bus service has recently been cut by 50%, from 12 daily journeys to 6 on weekdays and 5 on a Saturday and none on a Sunday. The applicant's contribution of £830 per dwelling towards the cost of an £890 annual bus pass is an insulting gimmick. A sustainable settlement must have public transport links to major places of employment. The borough's major employment sites are at Keele, the hospital, Parkside, Chatley Valley and Ceramic Valley. There are no direct public transports from Baldwin's Gate to these sites. Unless you work 9 to 5 in Newcastle or Hanley Town Centre, you cannot travel to work by bus. The proposal would involve the loss of 11 hectares of best and most versatile agricultural land, contrary to our neighbourhood plan policy HG1. To this, we must add 5.6 hectares of MBV land already lost to development at Baldwin's Gate Farm in the last decade. Your Borough Council has declared a climate emergency. The response to a climate emergency requires more than just a reduction in emissions. We must conserve our best and most productive agricultural land in the face of an anticipated large-scale loss of productive land in other parts of the world. To permit development on this site would be the height of unsustainability. Your officer's report cites a High Court case brought by Paul Newman Homes Limited against Aylesbury Vale District Council in 2019. Your officer's adoption of the claimant's idea in that case to put relevant policies into a basket and decide whether the basket as a whole is out of date is an unworthy, tricksy way to eliminate the up-to-date core policy HG1 of our NDP. The High Court dismissed the claimant's case and the judgment was upheld at the Court of Appeal in 2021. Our planning consultants have written twice to your officers advising them that it would be unlawful to permit this application. Last week, a meeting took place between your officers, representatives of the parish council and steering group, and our planning consultants. The meeting was recorded. If this application is permitted, we have been advised to seek a public hearing, and if necessary, follow it up by seeking a judicial review. Our parish council has therefore formally requested that the Borough Council retain the recordings so that it can be produced as evidence in such a judicial review. Yesterday, the 10th of October, Sir William Cash MP wrote to the Secretary of State for Levelling Up and to the Borough Council, stating his agreement with our consultants' comments and calling for this application to be refused on both planning and legal grounds. The possibility of the applicant appealing against the decision to refuse is not a material planning consideration and not a reason to permit this application. You need to know that the recent government commissioned research shows that 93% of planning appeals that involve a neighbourhood plan are dismissed. To conclude, the officers have misapplied national planning policy. The borough does have a 5-year housing land supply, and the officers have misapplied MPPF paragraph 11D. They have had no regard for the MPPF paragraph 11C. They have not applied the relevant policies of a neighbourhood plan, and that has legal weight in the planning system. Policy HG1 sets out where the development growth should go, and it must be applied. And these are the reasons why this application should be refused. To permit the application would be unlawful, and this unsustainable application should be refused. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Would you like to? Thank you very much. We'll go on to the next part, which is the support of this application. Louise Thorne, are you here tonight? Would you like to take up your position? You may wish to switch the microphone off and on again because it's flashing at you and it might put you off. You've got 5 minutes.
Good evening, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Louise Thorne. I'm a chartered town planner and a partner with Knights PLC, and I'm representing the applicant, Richborough Estates, this evening. Your officer has presented the application in their thorough report and has explained the complicated planning policy background position and the subsequent legal advice which has been sought in this respect. We have indeed sought similar advice. In recommending the application for approval, your officer has set out how the benefits of the scheme significantly and demonstrably outweigh the very limited impacts of the proposal on the character and appearance of the local area. Indeed, the proposal aligns with many of the wider aims and objectives of the MPPF and local policy, including the general direction of the neighbourhood plan. Those significant benefits that I allude to include 200 new homes in a low density development, of which 50 will be affordable homes ranging from 2 to 4 beds. Significant upgrades to the local road network. This includes a new roundabout, which would slow the speeds of drivers entering and leaving the village, a current problem. Improved pedestrian footways, crossing points and accessibility, including a new puffing crossing across the very busy A53 and new and upgraded footpaths and cycle links. Improvements to the current substandard A53 Madeley Road junction. It would also include the creation of open space across approximately 40% of the site, which far exceeds policy requirements. This would include community parkland, allotments, a community orchard, children's natural play equipment and kickabout spaces. Retention of the mature oak tree on the site, and significant landscape planting and screening. This would result in a 42% biodiversity net gain for habitats and a 34% biodiversity net gain for hedgerows. This is significantly above the national 10% recommendation. There would also be funding for a third classroom at Baldwin's Gate Primary School, enabling the school to become a single form entry school rather than the current mixed age group classes. Funding to extend the GP provision at the doctor's surgery, the sympathetic retention of the locally listed farmhouse, and funding for further off-site sports facilities. In total, the development will provide approximately £1.85 million worth of financial contributions and significant community facilities in the village. In a time of national housing crisis and where the younger generation are unfairly struggling to get a foot on the housing ladder, the contribution that proposed homes would make to the local housing supply is significant. Not only would the development bring about 50 much needed affordable homes, but the split of dwelling sizes, which has been agreed with the council's housing strategy officer, will provide for 69 two-beds, 85 three-beds and 46 45-bed homes. Overwhelmingly, 77% of the dwellings proposed will provide for starter, family and downsizer properties, not large executive style homes. It should be noted that against the backdrop of some local residents and parish council objections to the proposal, the application has received 42 letters of support from people who see the development as a welcome addition to the local housing supply. Supporters have overwhelmingly expressed their interest in being able to afford to live in Baldwin's Gate if the development was to go ahead. The applicant and their team have worked hard to create a high quality scheme for the site that benefits both existing and future residents at Baldwin's Gate and is appropriate for the scale and nature of the village. The proposal before you has been almost 2 years in the making. Before the proposals were even drawn up for the site, we worked alongside your officers through formal pre-app, engaged with some of you here this evening through the Strategic Planning Consultation Group, and presented to and consulted with the Parish Council and Ward Councillor. Once a draft scheme had been developed for the site, we undertook wide-ranging public consultation with a large-scale leaflet drop and the provision of a dedicated consultation, questionnaire and website. We listened to all the feedback before presenting the final proposals to an independent design review panel.
1 minute.
They have highly commended the scheme. Their comments are incorporated into the final proposal. We strongly feel that the development has been designed for local people, both those already living in Baldwin's Gate and those wishing to stay in the village independently or move to the area. The scheme is fully supported by Staffordshire County Council Highways and Education departments, and there are no technical consultative objections. Liaison with your officers continued throughout the past 2 years, and the Highway Authority fully endorses the significant highway safety improvements that the proposal would achieve. It is clear that whilst this proposal would result in the development of a greenfield site, that site is well located to the built-up area of Baldwin's Gate and will bring about overwhelming benefits to offset it. We would therefore respectfully request that you follow your officer's recommendation this evening and grant planning permission for the development. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, committee members, you will have now had a chance to, I hope, peruse the supplementary reports attached to this agenda item, and also taken on board the statements that have been heard tonight. This is a complicated issue, and I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that we as councillors are legal experts in any shape or form. That includes myself. So before I open that up, I would just like to ask a question myself before you respond, Mrs. Colleen. Has there been any advanced work in terms of the foul and surface water drainage scheme? I'm particularly raising that as an issue. I know it can be done by conditions, but having seen what happened with the gateway application, and the fact that even now, after the scheme's been built, there's still mitigation factors being pumping out that project in terms of the insufficient drainage facility. I just wondered if there's been any proper scoping in terms of how that's going to be mitigated in terms of the existing network of foul and water drainage, and any upgrade that could be provided, because if there isn't any there, it's going to be a serious risk in terms of the existing infrastructure. which will bring more complicated problems for residents. And I think we've got a due diligence and responsibility aspect to former residents and to ones that may occupy further properties if this application is approved. So I'd like an answer to that if you can, Mrs. Colleen. Thank you. And then come back on the other items raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the application is supported by a very thorough and detailed flood risk and drainage assessment, which concludes that with a number of measures in place, which include detention basins, permeable paving, infiltration basins, that the development won't create any flood risk issues for the wider area. So as part of the application, we've consulted with the Environment Agency. Staffordshire County Council is the lead local flood authority, United Utilities and Severn Trent Water, and all of them have come back with a response to say that they have no objections to the drainage approach and strategy, subject to suitably worded conditions, securing the detailed drainage design and foul and surface water flows. So members will note that in the recommendation, there's conditions listed there that require the submission of those details. Following the various speakers, I just wanted to come back on one particular point, really. Your officers aren't saying that the neighbourhood plan is out of date because it's more than 2 years old. What we are saying is that policy HG1, which is considered to be the most important policy within that document relating to the provision of housing, is out of date. And we're saying that because the borough-wide housing need calculation has changed since the neighbourhood plan was adopted, and the context in terms of land supply and potential distribution of development has altered since that time. The reference to the being older than 2 years old relates to paragraph 14, which is up on the screen still. And paragraph 14 of the NPPF says that ordinarily, the identified conflict with the neighbourhood plan would, and of itself, be likely to amount to significant and demonstrable harm, weighing towards a refusal. But in this case, paragraph 14 doesn't operate in that way because the neighbourhood plan is more than 2 years old. So you'll see there that it says, provided all of the following apply. And the first one of those in point A says that the neighbourhood plan became part of the development plan 2 years or less before the date on which the decision is made. So because that part of paragraph 14 is not complied with because it's older than 2 years, then paragraph 14 doesn't apply.
Colleen, I'll now open it up to members. Councillor Bryan.
Thank you, Chair. I think we've heard a great deal of information this evening, all of which has been informative to everyone, I would guess. I'd like the opportunity to speak to fellow committee members and summarise the facts. I'm a resident of Baldwin's Gate and genuinely love where I live. My husband was brought up there and I couldn't be happier to raise my children there. I use the post office, the butchers and the filling station. I'm also a passionate borough councillor and where appropriate, try to understand all parties' points of view. Being a relatively new borough councillor, I have worked closely with officers to aid in my knowledge and experience so I can best support residents. However, in this case, I have huge concerns over the officer's recommendations to approve the application. I believe it to be potentially unlawful. Thus could be an unsafe determination of this application if the committee approved it. In my view, the officers appear to have misapplied the policy. Based on the facts, I feel it's only correct for us to refuse this application. It's in the best interest for the committee, the ward and the borough. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bryan. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Chair. It's great to see that there are so many people here tonight interested in the application relating to Chesterton we're going to hear later on. I'd like to hear, if I could, from our legal officer who is with us this evening. We've heard the word unlawful on a couple of occasions now, and I think it's worth accessing the advice that we can from our own legal officer, because surprisingly enough, we found there's an applicant whose lawyer says this is all fantastic, and the opponents to the scheme, the objectors, have produced a legal opinion that says, I think very specifically, that the council's construction of paragraphs 11 and 14 of the MPPF is inaccurate and at variance with 150 other local authorities, or that's what the consultant has said in the material that I've been able to have a read of. So I'll be interested in hearing from our legal officer, what does unlawful mean in that context? Because if it just means we disagree with the officer's opinion, or if our officer is saying something, we don't think that's correct, is that the same thing as being unlawful, or is it the case that we're simply weighing balances here in a way that is different from the application of that balance that the judgment of the objectors to the scheme has come to? So if our legal advisor could speak to that, I'd be grateful.
Would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you, Chair, through you. My understanding of the assertion of unlawfulness would have to relate to the council having misdirected itself on a point of law when it's writing the report and when it's reaching its recommendation. And the representations that I have seen going into some detail on that relate to the matters that our planning officer has discussed in her introduction, the operation of the 2 paragraphs that she put on screen. And it won't surprise you to learn that I have carefully considered the representations, carefully considered the approach the officers have taken, and used the opportunity whilst this item was deferred for reasons we all know, to revisit that and suggest some alterations to the report to make our approach to that a little bit clearer. Having done that, and also having taken external legal advice, because I am a planning lawyer by trade, but ever since I moved into the role that I'm currently in, I don't maintain an active caseload. So I wanted to be absolutely sure that I wasn't missing any recent developments. And having taken legal advice, I'm concerned that the approach set out in the report is sound and lawful. You will unfortunately always get lawyers disagreeing with each other, otherwise the profession would fall apart, I'm afraid.
Can I just clarify that there's been no changes to national policy or guidance that would make the policy out of date?
Referring to
HG1.
HG1 is the local plan policy, but sorry, which is part of the local plan, of course. But I'm content that the analysis set out in the reports in relation to the policies and their out of datedness and the application of the law in reaching that decision, as was covered in the introduction, is sound and lawful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Holland. Would you like to come back?
Thank you. I suppose the reason I asked the question is because clearly there's a huge strength of feeling about the application, and I wouldn't want for us to make a decision tonight that is simple to challenge. And I say that on both sides, because if we approve the application, if we are minded to accept our officer's recommendation, we've received in unkind terms, you might say, a veiled threat of judicial review from objectors to the scheme, and that may well be their legal right to do so. So if we reach a decision that they don't like, they say they're going to take us to court. If we reach a decision the applicant doesn't like, if we refuse, then we are opening ourselves to an appeal, which is a serious matter in itself. But if we don't get it right, if we don't apply ourselves to the facts that are in front of us and to the policy that we should be applying, then we will open ourselves to a cost award on the other side. So it seems to me that whatever decision we reach tonight is likely to be challenged. And there are an awful lot of people who would like us to believe that it's clear cut one way or the other. My sense is, and I've not heard other members of the committee speak, but it is more likely than not that members here tonight are going to want to weigh the balance in a way that may not please the massed ranks of officers that are here in front of us. But I can sense that there is a case here for the application to be refused. because to my mind, having read the reports, because as our officers have outlined, the supplementary report does adjust the substantive report in quite a few ways, partly as a result of the meeting that was had earlier this week and partly because of the judgment of our legal advisor who we've heard from tonight. So there are things about this application that are beneficial and there are things about the application that are harmful. And if we as a committee tonight are satisfied that the harms substantially outweigh the benefits, as in every application, we are likely to recommend or to propose and vote through a refusal. But that to me seems to be the way forward. That to make it clear, if I was to refuse the application tonight, I would not be doing so on the grounds that it was unlawful, because that's a big word, a very strong word, and it's a word that member of the committee has used tonight already. So I'd be interested in hearing what other members have got to say, but I'm grateful for the advice we received. And I think when we're reaching our decision tonight, we do need to take careful consideration of our officers' report and of the advice we get. Otherwise, we are going to open ourselves to some very tricky legal challenges in the future. That would be my guess.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Would you like to come back on that?
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, and those are all sound points. One thing I would say, members, is don't worry about whether you're pleasing or displeasing officers. Officers will not be pleased or displeased no matter which way this goes. Our role is to give you the advice that you're seeking, and your role is to make that decision. So just in terms of the unlawfulness and the balance arguments, I think if I may say so, Councillor Holland makes some sound points there. So the recipe, if you like, that officers have followed in terms of how the NPPF is to be interpreted and applied, what the legislation says, how previously decided cases have gone. I'm content that has all been applied appropriately in terms of how your case officer has arrived at the recommendation she has arrived at. Where a matter of planning judgment comes in, which is of course what the committee will know, they are able to supplant their own view for that of the officers if they have a sound rationale for doing so, is deciding on that balance that you spoke about. But also, whether or not the policies are out of date is a matter of planning judgment as well. My view and advice would be that the officer's professional judgment in terms of whether or not the policies are out of date is a more difficult one to depart from in terms of having sound and sensible justification for that. So I hope that's of assistance to you, but I repeat again, I'm very content that the way in which the officer has arrived at that view, she has followed a correct and lawful process.
That response.
Whether I'm satisfied or not is irrelevant. It's about making the right decision. I suppose, so final comment before I let other people have a go at this. Looking at paragraph 14, it is one of the rare occasions where there is something quite specific, and some play has been made of that 2-year cutoff point. Now, lots of things are more than 2 years old. The Aylesbury decision is more than 2 years old. We're not disapplying that absolutely because we fancy it, and there's a sunset in it. But paragraph 14, if we read it very closely, it merely states 4 different circumstances, which if they are met, mean that it is very likely an application's harm will outweigh the benefit. It is not the be all and end all, and the NPPF is quite flexible in some ways. And if we are going to apply close scrutiny to the footnote to paragraph 11, we should also be similarly taking a rounded view of paragraph 14. I accept what paragraph 14 says, and I accept that it describes a set of circumstances in quite a concrete way. But that is not to say that the higher, more a priori balance or judgment that we're trying to make is whether or not a development is sustainable development or not. The rest of the NPPF gives us some steerage on that, but there is a primordial thing that we are supposed to be grasping for, which is to determine whether or not proposed development is sustainable development or not. And if it is sustainable, then there is a presumption in favour of us permitting it. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hutchinson.
Right. I have 2 questions, if that's okay. The second question echoes a little bit what you said yourself, Chair, earlier. But the first question is, sorry if I missed it in the paperwork. Do you have any information on the DPH or the dwellings per hectare for the proposed development? And how does that compare with the rest of the village in Baldwin's Gate? That's my first question. My second question, as someone who lives in Newcastle Borough but works in Shropshire, I travel the A53 every day for work. I drive on the A53 through the middle of Baldwin's Gate. I drive past the Mannering Arms, the Whitmore Tea Room, and drive down bank into Baldwin's Gate. I drive past the petrol station, the general store, the Methodist church in the centre of the village, and then drive up bank again at the other end of the village. So to me, Baldwin's Gate is at a lower level above sea level than the surrounding areas. I would estimate it to be about between 15 and 20 metres. So, and even on days when there's 2 or 3 days of heavy rain, I do drive through flooded roads where the drains just can't cope in Baldwin's Gate and in the Whitmore area. So I would just like a bit more reassurance that the developer feels they can handle the drainage system for the 200 dwellings. Has the drainage system been fully thought out? Can they handle the wastewater and take it away? So the residents, if we approve, so the residents in the 200 planned development don't waken up one day and all the gardens are flooded. We have rainwater, we have foul water, and possibly some human sewage. I'd just like a bit more reassurance regarding the drainage, if that's okay.
Thank you, Councillor Hutchinson. Let's go back on that.
In response to your first question about the density of the development, overall it would be 30 dwellings per hectare. But if that's just the developable area, sorry, but if we included the open space within the site and looked overall at it, then it's 15 dwellings per hectare. But if we took it as the 30 dwellings per hectare, the adjacent development off Gateway Avenue that's called Meadowbank, that density is 26 dwellings per hectare. There is a variety within Baldwin's Gate. It does vary. I think there's some elements where it's as low as 14. But yeah, I suppose the most directly relevant development is that adjacent to it, which is 26. And then in relation to the drainage concerns, as I said previously, really, we've had no objections from the Environment Agency, the Lead Local Flood Authority, United Utilities, Severn Trent Water. So we've consulted with 4 bodies there who are obviously all experts in that field, and they've all considered the information that's been submitted. It's a very comprehensive assessment of flood risk and drainage that's been submitted, and they have no objections to the scheme, subject to the imposition of conditions. And yeah, the recommendation conditions 13 and 14 both relate to we would be saying that no development can commence until those details have been submitted and approved, and in approving those details we would consult with those bodies again. So we consult with the Lead Local Flood Authority particularly and seek their views, and it would only be if they had no objections to those details that we would be approving those details.
Question?
Thank you, Chair.
I'd just like to ask a question before I throw it back. One of the speakers mentioned about highway safety tonight, and that the proposal didn't enhance highway safety. I just wondered if we got a view from the highways officer that's with us tonight, whether you could enlighten us further on the scheme that's been proposed and what your view is on that. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Is that right? Okay. In terms of the application, as part of the access to the site, they're proposing a scheme of mitigation. This is the directly as you're entering into Baldwin's Gate would be a large roundabout, about 38 or 36 meters diameter of a roundabout, which purpose of a roundabout will be to get the deflection. So as you're coming into there, you can't just drive straight through. You have to go around the roundabout. So the whole purpose of the roundabout will be to slow the vehicles and the speeds coming into Baldwin's Gate from the Shropshire end. So as part of that, there'd be all the schemes going in as they'll be treated the road further down, probably changing the speed limits, etc. A new layout, approach to the site. There'd be a new crossing that would be going just past the roundabout. So how people from that site, if they need to get across the road towards the school and the filling station. So you've got, issues there for us in terms of that would stop the vehicles or slow them down to speeds that we would like to see more commensurate on an area where we might see sort of higher activities of pedestrian activity, which at the moment, obviously you've got the A53, which is a main commuter route that just happens to go straight through the village, and you can end up with a bit of sevens. So the scheme is submitted will do quite significant, because a lot of accidents, not all accidents, but a lot of them, the severity of them accidents can be directly attributable to higher speeds. The one thing a roundabout will do is reduce them speeds to a lot lower than probably what they're going through the village at the moment. And on top of that, if we have got then a pedestrian or puffing crossing later on, when people are activating it and people start seeing that activity of pedestrians and people walking alongside the road, you tend to find vehicle speeds will lower as a result. So the application itself, directly outside of the site, is taking measures to ensure that the development itself will be safe. We've had a preliminary look at the junction layout to ensure we can achieve it. There's been some safety audits, things like that it is achievable. It's not going to cause us harm in terms of if it were to be built. It's something that we would, I think, when we've discussed it with our local area office, we've always had issues along there, and we're trying to get them speeds down. And there's probably no better way of doing it than a solid roundabout that's going to be sat there on the approach to the. In terms of further afield, and obviously, there has been an in-depth report that's accompanied the application that goes through a lot of them issues, and there's been no identifiable issues along that net. There's various bits here and there, but there's been nothing specifically that would give us reason to step in and sort of spend council money in terms of treating any highway safety issues.
Would the fact that the roundabout where it's going to be sited, would that be a contributory factor because of the way that the bend is now, and the traffic will be virtually coming around that bend and hitting the roundabout?
Yeah. And I said originally, well, this is why we've probably gone a bit further with this internally than we would do normally, because it's what we've got is a general arrangement, but we will have looked at it in terms of visibility displays, because there's obviously design standards you need to meet with any sort of form of junction. So in terms of how we've approached this, we've had our engineers to look at the roundabout to see if there is anything inherently unsafe with it. So the visibility displays on the approaches are all acceptable. The gradients coming in and everything else would be acceptable to us. Otherwise, we would have probably raised it as an issue and gone back to the drawing board with the developer and said, you can't build that there. So we're happy that you can construct a roundabout in that location. Obviously, when we go through a more detailed design and sort of horizontal, vertical alignments and all the rest of it, there may be some slight tweaks, but I think what you'll probably find is there might be some issues on the approach a bit further out, maybe even some sort of gateway features or something, just to further enhance the sort of roundabout that's coming up to you.
And lastly, has there been any dialogue with HS2, because they're doing some enhancements to certain junctions?
Yeah.
Would that be a factor?
Yeah, no. Yeah, there has been some dialogue with HS2. I think we got in the early stages of it. I didn't think we were working alongside the developer to find a piece of work that we think is acceptable. And I think some of the HS2 stuff got missed on the early side of things. And I think as times come on and we had the response back from the HS2 and we liaised internally with our HS2 sort of team at the county, there is some works proposed mitigated up by the Swan with 2 necks, which is probably a considerable betterment in terms of the scheme that they're providing than the one that the developer was going to provide. But all the information that's come back from HS2 when they eventually got hold of it in terms of the traffic numbers and everything else has all been factored into them reports. So you have got a worst case scenario that's been assessed, but obviously HS2, once it's finished, a lot of that traffic's going to disappear. It's not going to be there permanently. But for completeness and to give you a robust report, that has been assessed correctly, and it's been taken, the figures that they've lifted from the HS2 reports, and in some cases, I think the actual figures that they used in the transport assessment were heavier than what HS2 would do. So I think we're content that that piece of work is quite robust, because there was a subsequent technical note as well that addressed some of the HS2 issues.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very helpful. Councillor Moffat.
Thank you, Chair. There's a number of concerns that I'd like to kind of pick up on. I think the biggest one for me is this development seems to go so contrarily in the face of the neighbourhood development plan. We know that neighbourhood development plans take a huge amount of time, people's commitment, really thinking about the shape of the future of their community. It's not done lightheartedly, it's done in a way with real consideration and concern for the future of the community. I'm very concerned that we as a planning committee would go against the work that has been done by the local community, particularly in the light of a number of other neighbourhood plans that are in process right now. The message it sends out is that this is an empty exercise, and that actually we're just paying lip service to genuine community involvement in the development of local communities, parish communities, and indeed on the eve of our next step of Newcastle Borough's own local plan, where we want to engage with communities. I just think this is a really contrary move, and I, for one, as a councillor, really want to make sure that we listen to communities. They're the greatest experts that we have in terms of how communities should be developed. I don't believe that people in our local communities are NIMBYs. I think people are very able to embrace the idea of building future homes, building future communities, but that has to be done in a genuine way which listens to the community's concerns. So that's number one. The other is that in our statement as a borough council, what we have stated is that, yes, we have got a target of 7,000 homes, and it states on our own website, equating to 350 homes per year. Well, this is 200 in just one little community. That really seems like an unfair burden on the shoulders of a particular community. I don't want to see communities pitched against each other saying we don't want to hear, push us somewhere else. I think that we need to be taking a really cohesive look. The other thing I'm aware of, and thank you for everybody for the presentations, the man from the parish council, I'm sorry, I can't remember your name, you mentioned that in the plan between 2013 and 33 in terms of housing development in the parishes, that you're already exceeding that in terms of what the agreed plan was. And although there were 42 letters in favour of the development, there were 193 letters of objection and a number of people who have actually come out this evening as well. I don't know that everybody is objecting to it, but I take it from the applause that there was a fair amount of objection. And the final thing really is the point that Councillor Holland was making about we need to make the right decision in the right way, because if we vote in favour of the plan and the various objectors then go through a procedure to take us to various courts, including the High Court, then we need to be aware of that, not only in terms of the cost and the time of our officers, but also what the story is, what that puts out to the rest of our community. But the thing that I am also aware of is that statement that approximately, I think it was about 93% of appeals where there has been a neighbourhood plan in place fail. So I think that's another thing that we also need to consider. So sorry for, making all of those points. I'm not asking for answers, but I am stating my concern, and those concerns are leading towards me feeling that I would refuse. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Moffat. Our legal advisor just wants a quick word.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, through you, and apologies for interrupting. I just want to be clear that whilst, on a personal level, I sympathise entirely with the concern that the committee might have, and indeed the community might have, as to the impacts of a refusal or the recommendation refusal on the neighbourhood planning, process and regime as a whole. But what I would caution against is allowing that to creep into your thinking too much when you're determining this application. The footnote to paragraph 14, which requires all 4 of those conditions to be met before the neighbourhood plan can have that significant and determinative weight, that footnote has been put in there by government. It operates on a binary basis, I'm afraid. If those 4 conditions are not met, and they're not met in this case, then that neighbourhood plan cannot be taken by yourselves as being enough or likely to be enough to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the harm. You will need to find or be able to rationalise why that's the case. And if you're not able to do that, that's unfortunate. You'll have to consider whether you're content with the balance of harm that rests after that. But what I would urge you not to do is to make a decision, based on whether or not this application undermines the principle of neighbourhood planning. That would not be a sound basis to proceed, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Councillor Fear.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to Councillor Holland, who's rather stolen some of my thunder. And thank you to our legal officer now, because I was going to make a couple of observations and ask 3 questions. I was going to do them in a sort of form of a chiasmus. So my first observation was that it's quite right that we shouldn't worry about risk of appeal. I thought it a little ironic of one of our presenters this evening to immediately imply that we should be worried about the risk of a judicial review. It seems to me that neither of these things should be in our mind. We should be concentrating on the material conditions that are in front of us. That brings me on to my 3 questions. My first question is about the housing need for the borough as a whole. We're told that this has changed, and this is one of the problems that we have. I was just wondering if we could be reminded of what it has changed from. We know we have the figure in front of us what it is now, but what it has been changed from, because that would give us some notion of proportionality. My second question is one about sustainability. Now, this is sustainable, of course, is a bit of a weasel word, as we all know. But in the report, we refer to on several occasions when planning inspectors have decreed that Baldwin's Gate is a sustainable area. One of our presenters also mentioned that a government survey group, when in the genesis of the neighbourhood plan, referred to it as teetering on the brink of sustainability. And again, time matters here. I wonder if we can put those in chronological order. So are we seeing a direction of travel there? In other words, has the inspector held forth after that survey, or is it the other way round? Another matter that's been raised has been the question of the loss of high quality farmland. I note in the report it refers to 11 hectares of such land being lost in this respect. Could the officer remind us what proportion that is of the total application site? Because I think that too is quite an important point. And my final thing, I've done my questions. I return to Bootcase myself with an observation, and I just leave this in front of members of the committee really to think about. We've been talking about balance, and I think here I am inclined to think more about the balance of pros and cons in terms of making my decision after I've listened to the rest of the debate. I just wondered whether paragraph 174, which is mentioned again on page 18 of the report here, might have something to say to us. There's a lot of stuff at the beginning about the benefits of a manicured environment, so to speak, that this development will produce. But of course, that's not the same as the open countryside. And I note that indeed it's quoted for us on page 18 of our report. That paragraph 174 of the MPF talks about the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside and the wider benefits from natural capital and ecosystem services. In other words, the natural countryside, undeveloped, has a benefit in and of itself. And maybe we need to balance that against a manicured development, which is really of a rather different nature. That, of course, is again for individual members to balance in their own mind, but it seems to me perhaps a factor we should be thinking about.
Sophia, wish to come back on that? Have we got any other members that wish to speak on this? Councillor Panther.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not unfamiliar with this area because I think the first 2 or 3 years of my council life, I was in fact the ward member for this particular area. I was looking what it said on the report on page 9. It has a school, yes, a junior school, which is under quite strain. And I think on page 23, it states that it is unable to cater for the numbers projected to come from this development. We need expansion. There is no high school in the area. The nearest one is either Newcastle or Madeley. The doctor's surgery is part-time, and I know it struggles to staff that because it's part of the doctor's surgery where I attend. The shops there, yes, there are certain shops, but they are rather small. And with a near 50% increase in property development in this area, I don't think that is at all sustainable. The main road going through the area is a main commuter road. And this development will no doubt increase the number of cars and the commuters involved because the bus service there is diabolical. It will also therefore increase the amount of air quality, what do you call it won't purify the air at all. It's quite opposite. It will poison the atmosphere a lot more. The objections on page 25 were from the letters of objection. Quotations here are pretty sound. I'm particularly concerned. It says there's no evidence of need for 200 additional dwellings. There is in regards to borough target, but the wrong type of development is proposed here because there's nothing proposed in the development for any disabled bungalows for a start. It's something I've always been very keen on. It is a rural area. The loss of land because even less employment possibilities, and there's no projection at all in this development for creating any further employment possibilities, which means people are going to have to commute even more. I've tried to come here, Chair, with an open mind on this matter. At the moment, I have not heard anything that would convince me to vote in favour of it. And unless I hear contrary to that, I shall recommend this committee vote against it, because I certainly shall. Thank you.
Panther, Councillor Gordon.
I've tried to approach this really with an open mind. I've read all the reports and listened to the presentations, and the conclusion I've reached, hearing all the evidence, is that this is the wrong location for a development of this size. And my conclusion, I think, reflects or is influenced by two statements in the report from planning officers. The first is on page 11 of the report, and I'll quote, it's fairly brief, and I'll quote it if I may, Chair. Local and national planning policy seeks to provide new housing development within existing development boundaries or previously developed land where available. This statement is followed in the officer's report by the admission that residential development on this greenfield site outside the settlement boundary would be contrary to this preferred approach. Chairman, contrary to this preferred approach. On page 18 of the report, it's acknowledged that the agricultural land identified for the development comprises best and most versatile land. And the author of the report makes the point that the loss of this land weighs against the proposal. And those, I think, are very, very hefty and very influential statements, which encourage me not to favour the application. There are other concerns I have, Chairman. The report lists the measures the developer will take to sort of compensate or mitigate for the proposal. So there's a lot about landscaping, playground, but it seems to me that what's been offered is an attempt really to try and replace what shouldn't have been lost in the first place. The borough's conservation officer has expressed concern over the loss of hedgerows and makes the point on density that the proposal is dense and suburban in appearance and does not reflect the character of the local landscape. You yourself, Chairman, have raised the question about the sewerage and foul water. There's a reference in the report to contamination, which, once again, if we are exercising due diligence, we should highlight and pursue. And for this to be a sustainable application must mean that there are good public transport links. And I think we've established that the public transport service is rudimentary to say the least. I would say, Chair, it would be very difficult for somebody to use public transport travelling from Baldwin's Gate to Newcastle or Hanley and hold down a sort of 9-to-5 job. Almost impossible if they were doing any shift work or weekend working. And it's for those reasons, Chair, that my inclination, the evidence that we've heard, is not to support the application.
Councillor Gorton, I also agree with you about the bus service. Recently, there have been changes in terms of curfew and times. It makes it very hard now for people to actually plan journeys when they actually do turn up. That's the buses, of course. The actual bus service has deteriorated markedly over the last 5 years, to the extent now that I'm receiving, as a county councillor, a plethora of representations on this very matter, that people cannot rely on the transport in terms of bus and public transport in this area. So I share your concerns.
That was just what I was going to ask. Councillor Holland is once again still in my thunder.
So first of all, in relation to the question about best and most versatile agricultural land, so there's 11 hectares being lost. The only information that we have is that the remaining agricultural land that will continue to be farmed is 237 hectares. But
Can I just ask the office, Mr. Chairman, what is the size of the proposed development as in the outlined site? I mean, I was interested in the proportion of those two things.
Just bear with me a second, sorry. I think it's 5.3 hectares, something like that. Oh, 13.21 hectares. Yeah, so 11 hectares of best and most versatile agricultural land will be lost. So you've referred to those two that seem different opinions on sustainability, or how sustainable it was as a location. I'm afraid I can't give you the chronology of those. I don't know the dates of those, the documents. What I can say is that officers have assessed the sustainability of the site on the basis of what's in the NPPF, and the three sections that I displayed to you on the screen at the beginning in my presentation, which is the economic, the social, and the environmental aspects. That's how we've assessed whether it's sustainable. And I think obviously there's increased impact as more houses are built, and that has an impact on the various services in the area. But for example, the school, there'll be there's various Section 106 contributions that will go to improvements in those to try and factor in that additional impact. So there's, in the recommendation, you'll see that there's the additional contributions towards local health infrastructure, and that would go towards it, because there's a GP service at the moment which is only part-time. So and I think in their consultation response, the consultee referred to, that figure is based on projected number of spare with me, an additional 480 patients in the locality. So on that basis, they're requesting £124,000. And then obviously nearly £1.5 million for school places, which has already been discussed, will go towards improvements to both schools, but particularly to the primary school. So in terms of sustainability, the village does have services. It has a shop, it has a school, it has the pub, and these financial contributions will all go to help mitigate the impact of the additional residents in the village. I think that was all the questions, was it?
My final question, Mr. Chairman, and just an observation, and I thank the officer for her answers, is that the one about farmland, I did a little, I think on my phone, it's got one of those calculators on. That equates to, I think, around 85% of the proposed site is best quality farmland. My final question was one about housing targets. I mean, we know the current one. Can we be reminded of the previous one?
Yeah, we haven't got that figure to hand, but memory seems to recall. But it was under the it was below 300 per year as the trajectory. So that there is a disparity there, and of course, you know, we have to work to the current figures, which are they're not a ceiling. It is a floor, so we need to be cognizant of that as well.
Speakers. Okay, in that case, oh, sorry, Councillor Holland.
To do something exciting, Chair, but on the basis of what we've heard, I will stick my neck on the block. I will propose refusal. Now, we're going to have to formulate some reasons, and they're going to have to stand up to scrutiny. So let's go with two that I can think of to start off with. And again, I value our officer's advice, because I'd be interested to know whether or not what we've heard from colleagues in the room is sound reasoning. So we've established, I think, that the neighbourhood plan and its policy are not conclusive. We cannot rely on them as a decisive reason to refuse, but they still have weight. And in my mind, they have considerable weight. We've heard from Councillor Moffat. Those are democratically agreed plans. An awful lot of thought has gone into it. And the underlying assumptions on which those plans were made, and the underlying assumptions that policy is based on, have not substantively changed. They've not changed a huge amount. Yes, they've shifted. So we've heard a little bit about the change in the housing quota and the amount that we're supposed to be delivering over time, and the amount that presumably will be allotted then to the Baldwin's Gate area. but I'm inclined to apply as much weight as possible to a policy that has been democratically agreed by the residents of this borough. I don't want to be approving development that is contrary to the wishes of people in the borough, particularly when the proper process was gone through. And I feel bad a lot of the time. I was first elected to this council in 2011, and during my entire political career, we have never had an up-to-date set of local development policies. It just hasn't been the case. The government came in 2010, and since then our policies have all been out of date. But that's not to say that they can be discounted entirely. Yes, they're not conclusive, and the policy that residents would like us to rely on, I don't believe is conclusive, but I believe we should be according it due weight, and we should be according due weight to the emerging local plan that our council is developing now. So if possible, I would like to move refusal on those grounds. It is contrary to policy, because there should be some weight applied to that. And I'm also interested in probing a little bit further what Councillor Gorton had to say. So as a second head of refusal, perhaps, it's this loss of best and most versatile agricultural land. It is about how we may conceivably be at the tipping point of sustainability, because this is a large application. It's a significant number of units that the applicant is seeking to deliver. And if we are at cumulatively the point where Baldwin's Gate is about to be bust, where we're about to hit the point of no return, where actually, no, this is unsustainable, we should be according weight to that. And we should be saying that we're refusing this on the basis that it is not sustainable development. There is harm to the rural area associated with this. I think we acknowledge that. And the question is, do all of these things outweigh the benefits that we've heard? Now, I understand that we're going to have to, when we reach a decision on this, when we're voting on it, we do need to weigh the improvements to the highways. We do need to weigh the money that we believe will be coming forward for local school places and for other improvements. I have to say, I'm a cynic, and so a lot of what's in the list of conditions and the stuff we hope to extract from a developer, I'm not sure we will ever see, but I'm sure our officers will be quick to tell me that I'm not allowed to take that into account. We are conditioning this. If we vote to approve the application, we're voting for it with all of those riders in place, and we will fully expect, as a development control authority, that we get what we need to make this an acceptable development. But on the basis that colleagues have indicated they'd like to vote for refusal, I'm going to put forward those two things to start off with, and I'm sure that other members would like to contribute to that, and I would like for us to arrive at a reasoned and coherent set of reasons for refusal, such that if we then vote against that, we can all vote in favour of the officer's recommendations with a clear conscience, knowing that we've applied the proper scrutiny to the process. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Holland. And just to remind members that the local neighbourhood development plan was adopted by this council over 2 years ago, and it was accepted at that time as the most up-to-date evidence in terms of local need and housing. Members should weigh up their mind how much weight they wish to give to the NDP if they feel that that proper weight has not been applied in terms of the relevant policies of the NDP, that it has a particular legal weight in the planning system, and which was adopted by the authority. Do they believe that that is still the case? Because if it is the case, then we can say categorically that we can introduce those things that we've talked about tonight in terms of best and versatile agricultural land and harm to the character and the actual space of the village in terms of all the things that can be attributed to inappropriate development in the rural area, including loss of employment, lack of employment, disabled facilities, making it even more imperative that a car user will be expected from this development. Let's kid us not that bus services will offer very little in terms of sustainable location. It will be predominantly car users that will be using this, as we have seen for other developments out in the similar area. So we need to, as members, that be satisfied that we think that the officers perhaps haven't or appeared not to have applied the MPPF paragraph 11D in terms of the consideration for the local development plan. And that still is a determination factor for this application. We also need to be satisfied that no trigger for the policy has set out where the growth should be from a borough's perspective, and so is not a material consideration to permit this development. We've heard figures tonight quoted about the targets of 7,000 homes of the lifetime of the local plan. And Councillor Moffat, you're quite correct in pointing out that this is a sizable part of that, bearing in mind this is supposed to be for the lifetime of the plan. So it does not appear that taking this in consideration as a valuable asset in terms of the land when it's not thought out, because it's beyond the village envelope, it's out in the countryside, it isn't immediately attached to the existing village and will no doubt form some harm. But we need to be pretty clear in our minds that if we're going against the officer's recommendations, that we accept the principles that the NDP has quite a lot of weight, considerable weight in the determination of this application. So with that in mind, with councillors start to formulate a proposal. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. I've been listening to the debate intently, and I hope I might be able to assist. What I've heard this evening is a lot of concern around the sustainability of the site, particularly around the bus services, but also in other areas. And yes, there's been appeal decisions on sustainability before, but members are entitled to take a fresh view with the previous decisions in mind, but with their local knowledge and the evidence before them. I'm also hearing concerns that are linked to sustainability, around the changing character of the settlement itself. But also what I think I'm hearing members say is that they are not entirely convinced that as much weight should be placed on the contribution that this scheme might make to the housing supply as officers have taken a view, presumably on the basis of delivery against what appears to be an emerging target in a longer term emerging local plan. And I also hear members, giving less weight to that housing supply contribution as against the harm they're identifying being caused to the openness and character of the countryside. So if I think I'm hearing members correctly, and you'll tell me whether I am or not, it might be a good point, Chair, to adjourn so your planning officers can have some thought about how they might articulate that into a refusal reason that members can take a view on.
Thank you for that. Before that's considered, I'd like to hear from members here that they may have an alternative proposal or to beef up the one that's been proposed. A start by Councillor Holland. Do we have any proposals? Councillor Bryan.
I would just like to second Councillor Holland's refusal and the reasons he's put forward and the comments you've made yourself as well, Chair.
Do you wish to add anything to it?
I don't think so, as long as the comments from yourself are added also about the agricultural land. I think that's all. Thank you at this moment.
I will adjourn. Oh, sorry, Councillor Panther.
Yeah, I still think we've made enough concern over the unsustainability of the infrastructure to cope with this development, and I would like that added to the reasons for refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Canterfear.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Looking at this, I've heard what Councillor Holland said, and I'd just like a little bit of clarification from him in a way. I hear what members say and their unhappiness. I also bear in mind the argument that, argument is the wrong word, discussion that we had about legal matters at the beginning of this. And I wouldn't like myself to have the neighbourhood plan seen as the silver bullet, so to speak here. I think Councillor Holland was saying that he wished to give it weight, but that it wasn't a killer. It wasn't a decisive thing in and of itself. It was merely part of a base of evidence which tipped the balance in the opposite direction, in his opinion, to the balance that the officer had at the end of the report. And I just wonder if I'm correct in saying that. And my final thought again is, if I am correct in saying that, whether he would feel that paragraph 174, this one that talks about the intrinsic value of the countryside, Quay countryside, might be something else that he would wish to be associated with. I merely ask that as a question.
Of course, the issue with making a proposal is then the member of the committee who is wearing another hat, also the portfolio holder, will try and correct or clarify what I'm saying. He's of course correct. He's absolutely right. I am not seeking to rely on the neighbourhood plan as the reason for refusal here. What I'm suggesting is that it has weight, and the weight we accord it has to be proportionate to how recent it is, only slightly older than 2 years, as to how robust it is. And we agree it's robust. We all voted for it when it came to full council for us to approve. And in that context, Councillor Fee is quite right. Paragraph 174 of the MPPF has just as much to say to us as any other paragraph of the MPPF, and it is relevant. Its reference specifically to best and most versatile agricultural land is relevant, and its reference to the character of the rural area is also relevant, particularly given what we've heard about Baldwin's Gate as a settlement being on a tipping point. If that means anything, it means that the character of that area is at grave risk of being lost forever if poor decisions are made by the local planning authority. So when we're formulating the reasons for refusal, I think Councillor Fee is quite right that there is much more there to bite into than simply saying, oh, well, we like the local development plan, or we like the neighbourhood development plan. Okay.
Holland, no other further speakers? Okay, well, at this point, I propose that we adjourn and take advice in terms of how we could possibly formulate the terms that you've set out this evening.
Are you going to propose a time for that adjournment,
Yes,
Mr. Chairman? Excellent.
10 minutes. Adjourn for 5 minutes.
Should we just step out?
Thank you for your patience, ladies and gentlemen, members of the public. That was a long 5 minutes, but I hope we've got some progress to report. So over to you, Rachel.
So we've come up with a form of words that says that it's considered that the site is an unsustainable location on grounds including limited access to public transport, the loss of best and most versatile agricultural land, and the harm to the character and appearance of the countryside, and that these harms weigh more heavily against the scheme, outweighing the contribution to housing supply that the scheme would bring. We will identify the precise policy conflict, but because that will take a bit of time to do that, but we'll certainly refer to policy HG1 of the neighbourhood plan and paragraph 174B of the NPPF, amongst others that we'll potentially be able to use. So is that along the lines that members were thinking?
Something along the lines of, judging by some of the members' comments, that it's considered that some weight applies to the neighbourhood plan.
If I can help, Chair, the very fact that the policy conflict with HG1 is being identified, it shows that the committee have given appropriate weight in their view to that plan in the context of all of the other considerations they've discussed tonight.
I'm just a little bit concerned about the policy conflict side. If we're proposing refusal, then we should be in agreement, not in conflict.
I think, so if it helps, Chair, I think the refusal reason is identifying matters that do conflict with the development plan. So that's where the word conflict comes in. And what your officer is saying is they will go away and they will identify the precise policies, because the applicant will want to know what those policies are. But to save us having another 5-minute adjournment, and my watch clearly isn't very good at timing 5 minutes, what we're saying is, have we captured the thrust of the debate? We're identifying for you specifically 174 and HG1, but we are saying that we will identify the other relevant policy numbers for the applicant's benefit when the decision letter is issued. But for the purposes of your resolution tonight, that form of wording is what we are proposing you take a vote on. And I was going to repeat it, but I won't do anywhere near as good a job as Rachel will do, because she's got it written down in front of her.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to officers for the work they've undertaken to formulate that. Is it worth including explicit reference to other elements of the emerging local plan? Because the neighbourhood plan is in itself part of the emerging local plan, and I'm aware that some progress has been made, although perhaps not a great deal of progress in terms of nailing down. I know the next stage of the local plan development will be site allocations, so we're not there yet, but we have had an extensive borough-wide public consultation on the potential future direction of travel when it comes to determining where we ought to be clustering new housing and indeed employment sites. Would our officers accept that reference to that is a good idea, or would you say it is a bad idea and we should limit it to the policies that you are able to enumerate from the old or preserved local development plan?
If I may, Chair, I would put that in the rare volume of bad ideas that Councillor Holland has come up with. It's probably only a single page in large type, but it would go in there. I would caution against putting very much weight at all on the emerging neighbourhood plan because of its stage of development. Is that what did I say? Neighbourhood plan? Sorry. Emerging local plan, because the neighbourhood plan is adopted, the emerging local plan isn't, and by its very nature, not an awful lot of weight, or very little weight actually can be given to it at this stage. But what might be more interesting is a debate around the housing target and the housing need and the significance of the contribution, I think, which is what you've already captured in this refusal reason.
Absolutely, yes. I don't know what extent of further debate is necessary, given that we've encapsulated the reason for refusal there. We were invited, I suppose, by one of the speakers, the speaker in favour of the development, the applicant's consultant, to accord some weight to the contribution that this development will make for affordable homes. Now, this isn't a reserved matters application. We're not looking at the exact layout and the type of homes that are being proposed here. And as a cynic, I'm uncertain whether or not the S106 that our officers recommend us that we seek to conclude for a 25% on-site affordable housing quota would necessarily stand up to further scrutiny, particularly in a financial viability test. But I would also put that in the context, so that contribution to housing and the contribution to affordable housing, I would put in the context of the total that is necessary for us to deliver over the lifetime of the current development plan. And it's not lots, is it? It's, a fraction of a fraction. So if we were going to have a further discussion about that, is that the sort of thing that our officer was thinking of? Because I think we've already encapsulated the reason for refusal. I don't want to shoot myself in the foot by being too specific.
Sorry, through you, Chair, my apologies. I was thinking more of a discussion at what will probably be an appeal in terms of what our housing requirements are and the relative weight that should be put on the contribution that this scheme makes. I'm not suggesting that this committee needs to have any further discussion about housing land supply, affordable or otherwise, as part of these proceedings, because it's already reached the view that whatever contribution this scheme would make to housing supply is not sufficient to overcome the harm that has been identified. And that's the resolution before you. That's a planning judgment you're perfectly entitled to exercise. There may be a later discussion at appeal where a planning inspector might supplant their own planning judgment on those issues, but that's your call tonight, and that's what the resolution before you that we've prepared for you tries to capture.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, I'm very content to agree. Yes, the contribution of housing that this would make is 200 units. That's all we can say at this stage, isn't it? It's an outline application. So we have weighed that, and I believe that the phrase that our officers have come up with encapsulates that all right.
Looking towards members, have we got any other proposals that are on the table tonight before we go any further with that one? No, I don't see that. So we've got a proposal to refuse. Do we have a seconder? That was a different format though, wasn't it? We've changed it, haven't we?
We've got your choice of seconders there, Chair. You had
Councillor Hutchinson, I know we've changed the original parameters of the early comments, and that's why I'm looking for a formal seconder. So are you happy to provide that? I'll take that.
Yes, Chair.
So can I see those in favour of the resolution to refuse? And that's unanimous. Thank you, members. Thank you for your patience. Now we all know that you're here for the next application. If you wish to stay, you're quite welcome to do so. If you wish to leave, I'll just hold things up while you leave the room. Thank you very much for your attendance. Four people left. Yes, thank you for your patience and indulgence with that rather lengthy hearing on that one. So, okay, we're bringing you on to item number 5. That's the application for major development, land off Cross Street, Chesterton, Girata Development Limited. Do we have a presentation on that? We do. Nick, I believe that's over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the approval of reserved matters relating to internal access arrangements, layout, scale, appearance, landscaping in respect of a residential development of 35 dwellings. It follows the approval of a hybrid application reference 20/00369/FUL. The site is located on land off Cross Street, Chesterton. It forms part of the wider redevelopment works within this part of Chesterton by Aspire Housing and the applicant. You can see on the screen, this is phase 2B, which is highlighted by the red edge application plan. The previous buildings, which were 3-story flats, have now been demolished, and the land is ready to be developed. Those works were carried out as part of the wider hybrid planning application. The image on the screen shows the site before the works of demolition took place, and this photo here shows the context of the area with the construction hoarding now around the site, ready to be developed. This is another photo. Just off the photo to the left is Ibstock Brickworks. This is Audley Road with the junction with Church Street. So the proposed dwellings primarily front either Audley Road, Church Street or High Street, and the proposed development represents a good quality design that will be suitable for the site and the character of the area. The image on the screen shows the proposed site plan, as discussed, with the 35 dwellings shown that primarily front the highway network. This is an artist's impression of what the proposed dwellings would look like. There's a mixture of facing brickwork, and also within the scheme, trees are to be retained, but also supplemented through replacement tree planting. A couple more images of the artist's impression. As discussed, the level of tree loss within the site has been agreed. An appropriate number and type of replacement trees are now proposed. The landscape section have now agreed that and raised no objections. I'll show the landscape plan. So the image on the left shows existing trees to be retained and then supplemented with additional planting. The development will provide acceptable living conditions for future occupiers and protect the amenity levels of neighbouring occupiers. Any issues can be addressed by suitably worded planning conditions, and on this basis, the scheme is acceptable and meets the development plan policies and the requirements of the National Planning Policy Framework. Thank you.
Mr. Bromley, okay, members have seen this. We're here to decide on the reserve matters. The actual principle of planning has already been granted and established. So this is the part where we agree on the detail. Councillors wishing to speak on this? Oh, I beg your pardon. We've got a supporter on this, haven't we? Mr. Evans, would you like to come forward and give your speech? And I do apologise, I should have taken you first.
Evening, Chair, members, officers. Thanks for the opportunity to speak this evening. My name's Tim Evans. I'm a director of Avison Young and I'm based in its planning, development and regeneration team in Birmingham. Avison Young acts on behalf of Aspire Housing, has been instructed by it to prepare this application for reserve matters approval for 35 dwellings on the site that Mr. Bromley's described in Cross Street in Chesterton. As members will be aware, Aspire Housing is committed to investing in Newcastle-under-Lyme and providing a choice of high quality homes for the people of the borough. As part of its housing development programme, Aspire undertook an extensive review of the condition of its existing housing stock, which identified that there were several issues with many of its properties within the Cross Street estate. In the main, these issues concern the poor layout and design of the houses, the failure to comply with the current energy efficiency standards, and the general unsatisfactory living conditions this presented for the occupants. Cross Street forms one of the 9 priority projects within the Newcastle-under-Lyme Town Investment Plan. Town deal funding has now been secured to support the regeneration of the area, providing a mix of housing for local people, allowing them to stay in the area and have high quality housing choice. As a result of all this, in May 2020, Avison Young submitted to the Borough Council what was known as a hybrid planning application on behalf of Aspire Housing, which sought part detailed and part outline planning permission for the redevelopment of 5 plots of land on the Cross Street estate. The consent granted by the Borough Council in February 2021 will result in the creation of an attractive and sustainable residential community that increases the number and choice of homes for a wide range of occupiers. In total, the Cross Street development, once completed, will deliver up to 123 new homes across a mix of type and tenures. Aspire is carrying out the redevelopment of the Cross Street estate in 5 phases. It's already completed the demolition of some of the old apartment blocks, as Mr. Bromley explained, and has commenced development of phase 1, which comprises 9 elderly persons bungalows. It's recently secured approval for the detailed proposals for phase 2A, which comprise 10 affordable homes, and they're described as walk-up apartments. And a few months ago, Aspire made an application to the council for full planning permission for the redevelopment of phase 3, which would comprise a scheme of 71 over 55 apartments. Dorata Developments, which for members' benefit is Aspire's development delivery vehicle, is now seeking the approval of its detailed proposals for the redevelopment of phase 2B. Pursuant to the outline planning permission that the local authority granted, the proposal shows how the land which lies between Lion Grove, High Street, Church Street and Audley Road would be developed to provide 35 new homes comprising a mix of 8 2-bedroom and 27 3-bedroom houses for either intermediate or market sale. Extensive engagement took place between Aspire's architects, Potsoni, and its consultant team and your officers, members and local people during the preparation of the outline proposals, including presentations of the scheme to your SPCG and a design review with Urban Vision. The feedback we received from Urban Vision highlighted that phase 2B is, in its view, an important part of the regeneration of the Cross Street estate, and it will enable a physical and visual link between the estate and the Holy Trinity Church to the southeast of the site. The design body suggested that the proposal should incorporate a new pedestrian link connecting phases 2A and 2B with the church and Church Street, and that the scheme should allow for the incorporation of retained trees. Aspire's details proposals for phase 2 respond fully to these comments. This proposal includes provision of a woodland walk through the centre of the southern development parcel, which will provide pedestrian access between High Street and Church Street. It will also serve to retain existing views of the church from this part of the Cross Street estate. The way in which the site has been laid out also responds to the comments that members in the design panel made about the need to retain existing trees within this development. In addition, it provides adequate compensation for tree losses that have occurred as a consequence of development on Cross Street phase 1. Accordingly, we would respectively request that members endorse your officer recommendation and permit the application subject to the conditions set out in their report. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Evans. You can rejoin the gallery now if you wish. Okay, and I'll throw it over to members, Councillor Williams and Councillor Fear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know this area very well, and I've no problem with the development. I think the demolition of these flats needed for a long time. They were damp. I know people who lived in those flats, and they were damp, and actually furniture was rotting. Carpets were always wet, and yet when they were built, probably 60s, 70s, they were at the top of the level of design and where people wanted to live. Now we see them demolished, and we're starting afresh. Can we? Are these properties? How long do you think they'll stay up? Are they sustainable in the sense where wider doors for wheelchairs, insulation? Is the insulation at the top of the we can demand? And or do we demand more? I know it's we got permission to build these properties, but when they build, are the eco-friendly as high as that we can get in this age where we live now, with the energy costs soaring? People need to be there living in properties that are not damp, that are sustain the heat within each property. And I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chairman, so you get the drift of my points. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor Williams. I'd just like to add at this point that throughout this process, the company have to be commended really for working with the council, the members and the officers on the work that's happened to date in the run up to this. And I've got some insight into the terms of the actual eco-credentials of the building, and this is likely to take. I'm sure that officers will be making sure that that is the case, but I'll just put your question over for officers to comment on.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's no planning policy requirement for the standard of the buildings to be of a certain specification, but other legislation, particularly building regulations, now requires standards to be met, and it's my understanding that the standards are improving and increasing all the time to ensure that all homes are energy efficient, fully insulated. So whilst I can't guarantee from a planning policy point of view that we can secure that they are of high energy efficiency, the building regulations legislation will ensure that that is covered, and I'm sure that Aspire Housing as a company will be trying to ensure for its future residents that those standards are met. Thank you.
Are you content with that, Councillor Williams?
Yes, where we're up to with this 2022, but again, with this planning committee, can we push the agenda on eco-friendly homes? It goes higher than what we've got at the moment. That's we need to pressure government and whatever to actually get better insulation in our homes. Not only just ventilation, but ventilation as well. It's all right to have enclosed and live in a closed environment, but you need ventilation, and the proper ventilation that still retains the heat in the houses. So, just one for the future, Mr. Chair, that hopefully this committee can play their part in the eco argument. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams, and I'm sure that Councillor Fear, in his capacity as portfolio holder, will be able to enlighten us further on this, and we'll be taking things like that into account as part of the emerging local plan. Councillor Fear.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like to re-echo what you said about aspire. I think liaison with the council has been exemplary, and I'd like to congratulate them on that. It makes this process much more pleasurable. I very much welcome this development. As Mr. Bromley said, I think building regs are moving all the time, and the problems that Councillor Williams has mentioned are being addressed and will continue to be addressed. I agree with him that these are tired objects. Perhaps they're not the only ones that had their origin in the early 60s which need replacing. I don't know, though I've never been described as wet. But I would like to move the proposals in front of us. I think this is a very welcome development. And I know from previous meetings that that's been true of former councillors in this area and indeed current ones.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Fear. Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a question, if I may. I think the County Flood Authority raises the issue of an absence of a drainage strategy. And I think that authority said we oughtn't to accept the application if it was omitted. I'd welcome sort of officers' views on that. If it is something that should be considered, should it not be a condition attached to the approval of the application?
Yes, thank you. Members will be aware that this is a reserved matters application, so it follows the previous outline application, which dealt with the flood risk and sustainable drainage matters. So there is a condition of the hybrid planning application, which requires sustainable drainage to be submitted for approval. Because the hybrid application was split into different phases of the development, some information for phase 1 has been approved, but the condition still requires sustainable drainage information for phase 2B, which is this application, to be submitted prior to the commencement of development. So that has already been secured as a condition, and the developer will be required to submit acceptable information, which we'll obviously consult with the lead local flood authority on when that is received. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bromley. Do we have any other councillors wishing to speak? You wish to second the proposal? Thank you. Councillor Panther.
Just a quick question, Chair. Paragraph 4.6 says electrical vehicle charging provision has been made. Is this for every house?
Condition of the hybrid application, I believe, required a provision of 25%. So that's what the developer will be looking to achieve. But I believe, notwithstanding that, they are seeking to provide a greater provision than 25%, if it is available and achievable for the particular plots in question.
If there's no other speakers on this, I'd like to move to the vote, please. So we've got a proposal from Councillor Fear and seconded by Councillor Williams. Can we see a show of hands, please, in terms of the recommendations to approve? And that's unanimous bar one, because I'd like to be recorded as abstaining. Thank you. Stop there, Mr. Evans, if you although thank you for your patience and bearing with us. Thank you. Okay, it brings us on to the item number 6 on the agenda. This is the application for major development at Park Hill Farm, Park Lane. Mr. Pat Pimlott. Mrs. Pat Pimlott. Do we have a presentation on this? Okay, we've got a presentation from Scott and we've got speakers on this as well. And Mrs. Pimlott. Pardon? All right. All right. We were led to believe you're online, but it's good to see you in person. Thank you. Members, there's a supplementary report for this as well. 2 supplementaries on this. Is there just one? It's just tabled as additional documents. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for a change of use of a field to a campsite for a period of 4 months during a calendar year. The application proposes 64 pitches, which would be used for both tents and camper vans. In addition, there would be new toilet and shower facilities plus a treatment plant. The principle of development is considered acceptable as such developments normally require a rural location, and it's concluded on the evidence provided that there is a need for such development. Officers consider the visual impact of the tents and camper vans would be limited due to the movable nature, in addition to the proposal being for a period of 4 months in any calendar year. The residential impact is negligible. The nearest property is 450 metres away, and given the level of screening, it's not considered that there would be any adverse impacts. In addition, environmental health do not raise any objections. In terms of the impact on trees, officers and the landscape section consider subject to conditions that this issue is acceptable. There is a triple SI adjacent to the development, and it's considered that there would be no direct impacts on the triple SI as a result of the proposals. Highways, in terms of the impact on highways, if you scroll through this. In terms of the impact on highways, there is concerns from the local highway authority. And this is based on the narrowness of Park Lane. However, it's noted that there are a number of notable locations along Park Lane where vehicles can pass. Passing places have been proposed as well onto the site access. It's therefore considered that the highway impacts would not be severe and an objection on highway grounds could not be sustained. In terms of the supplementary report, there is proposals to 2 amendments to the conditions. Condition 11 has been slightly amended to include camper vans in addition to tents. And condition 14, rather than making sure that the amenity facilities are permanent, to let the use become established, temporary and portable facilities would be provided in the meantime. And on that basis, officers' recommendation is to support the application.
that. I believe we've got a speaker, an objector, Mr. McKeever. Would you like to come down to the front, please? Being as I've made the 5-minute rule earlier this evening, you've got that luxury if you should require it.
My wife and I, in collaboration with some of the neighbours, would like to speak today as we are direct neighbours of the farm. We filed our objection online and we were legally advised to attend and speak today. We have numerous points which we wish to raise with concern in objection regarding the application and the planning report that has been prepared for this committee. All the points to be discussed support and go hand in hand with our initial objection letter, so please also see this for reference. To start, the planning report that has been prepared for this meeting is written in a manner that supports the proposal and doesn't truthfully or unbiasedly represent the consultations and findings from the agencies. In the planning report under subsection, is the principle of development acceptable? It states in paragraph 85 of the NPPF notes, planning policies and decisions should recognise that sites to meet local business and community needs in rural areas may have to be found adjacent to or beyond existing settlements and in locations that are not well served by public transport. In these circumstances, it will be important to ensure that development is sensitive to its surroundings, does not have an unacceptable impact on local roads. It is the wording in the NPPF of unacceptable impact on local roads that stands out here. The planning report then states, whilst the application site is only accessible by vehicles from Park Lane, which is an unlit narrow road, the application site is within walking distance from loggerheads via a public footpath found to the north side of the site. Whilst most users of the campsite would be expected to drive to the application site, it would be likely that some users would use the footpath to access the surfaces of loggerheads during their stay. However, it fails to mention large sections in the highways report that read, Park Lane is a narrow country road with a speed limit of 60 miles per hour, which has a very little passing places, and the road is also, again, unlit. The proposal will lead to the intensification of use of Park Lane and will lead to highway safety on the local highway network. I also note that the proposed location for this development is potentially not in a sustainable location. By this I mean there are no local amenities and all trips to such facilities are more than likely to be made via a private car. The neighbouring roads also have no footway provision and would require any pedestrian to walk within the road should they wish to walk to the immediate neighbourhood. We question how these two reports could differ in conclusion so massively, yet the highways report that comments on the condition unacceptable impact on local roads from the NPPF has been so blatantly disregarded. Next, we move to subsection parking and impact on highway safety of the planning report. The planning report states the Highways Authority have raised concerns due to the unsustainable location of the campsite and the quality of Park Lane, which is an unlit narrow country road. To mitigate some of the highways concerns, they have requested the details of parking areas and new passing places be provided with the application. Whilst these details have been provided, the Highways Agency still maintain their objection to the isolated location of the proposed campsite. Even after extra measures have been put into place, the Highways Authority again reject the application. How can this highways report have been so blatantly disregarded? In fact, in subsection of the planning report, paragraph 111, it states that development should only be prevented or refused on highways grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety, or the residual cumulative impacts of development would be severe. Isn't this exactly what the Highways Agency have found? An unacceptable impact on highway safety in their words. But yet again, this has failed to make weight in the planning report. Further in this, you will see a second representation from ourselves on the 14th of July, which indicated our bewilderment in the fact that amended or revised application plans had been provided, which seemed to show passing places had been added.
1 minute.
However, these two passing places are in fact on the drive of Parkhill Farm and not on Park Lane, which again is an unlit single track lane with very few passing places. So as far as we can see in the public domain, no details have been provided of passing places, yet the planning report says there has been. We are unsure of the integrity of the details in the planning report. Furthermore, a few lines down in the planning report, it states it is acknowledged that Park Lane is narrow at points. However, there are approximately 10 passing places which could be utilised. We would like to know where these 10 passing places are, as 2 of the images shown on the TV there were past the entrance and more towards our property. Also, in our conversations with Charles Winlett, the planning officer, he also stated that the lane was very narrow and mostly impassable in large stretches. In reference to our earlier comment and the report submitted to the planning officer, nowhere does it state about the users of Park Lane, which include walkers, farm equipment and construction vehicles servicing the Hales estate. And to conclude, let me say a bit, the Highways Agency report hasn't really been taken into consideration, and we believe that the plan report does not accurately reflect the findings. And if it was to be granted, we feel it'd be to the detriment of the public and highway safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKeever. Would you like to just switch the microphone off, if you don't mind? Thank you. Okay, I'll now invite the supporter of the scheme to come forward, Mrs. Pat Pimlott. Thank you. To start your speech, press the red button in front of you when you're ready to speak. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Pat Pimlott, the owner of Park Hill Farm. It is a working farm with a small shop, and we provide occasional educational visits for school parties, which are well received. We have been running a campsite at the farm for 2 years now under permitted development rights, which enable us to open for 1 month per year. However, we have found that this is quite restrictive, which is why we have applied to extend the use to 4 months over the summer period, June, July, August and September, in addition to providing permanent toilet and shower facilities. This site is for small camper vans up to 6 meters long and tents only, and the proposed pitches are low key and demarked with timber pegs. Visitors tend to stay for long weekends to enjoy peace, nature, and to help to support local facilities. There are footpaths leading to loggerheads directly from the site, which is a pleasant 1 mile walk through woodland. We have proposed a modern treatment plant for waste and small WC shower building to provide facilities for the campsite in the summer period. Park Lane is a no-through road with slow-moving traffic. Our highway consultant has verified that the proposals are in accordance with the National Planning Policy Framework. The approach road unclassified, but they are regular hard-standing passing places on the approach to Park Hill Farm. The existing access has good visibility onto the carriageway with 67 metres in the northwest direction and 154 metres in the southeast direction. The Highway Department requested 3 further on-site passing places along the length of the private drive to enable vehicles to pass. Vehicles are also able to turn and egress at various locations along the driveway and within the campsite itself. Care has been taken to ensure that existing trees and hedges are not compromised by the development. An arboricultural report has been submitted to the planning department, and both the planning and the landscape officers visited the site and have no concerns about the proposals. This is a positive, small-scale agricultural diversification which provides additional income to support the farming activities on site. We attract from the local area and further afield and encourage people to explore the area while enjoying the natural environment. We hope that you will support our application so that we can continue to run our campsite during the summer months. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Pimlott. Okay, at this point, I'll throw it open to members. Councillor Panther.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose I should say a few words as it's on my ward. I've got no objection to the application as such, but I'm very concerned on 2 points. Firstly, I like verification of where exactly these parking places are and have we got any shots of them? Because there seems to be conflicting interests about the objectors are saying, where are they? They don't know. So we would like to know for certain exactly where they are. My other element of concern is considering the fact that it's an unlit road. As it's dark, it's narrow. I'm concerned about what could happen there. What provision is going to be made, if any, for any extra lighting to make things safer, particularly around the entrance of to the farm and the site itself? Chair.
This question before I ask officers to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the map shown, could we just a bigger map showing the A53, the A53 Loggerheads to Market Drayton?
That's quite some considerable miles away from that location.
I know to walk from. I know the footpaths from Loggerheads.
Yeah, if you go through the wood, you can cut through to Loggerheads.
Show
But
the
if you go
efficiency
down,
on that.
it's a very wider.
Yeah. I mean, the point is, I've no problem with this planning application, Mr. Chairman. I mean, the other councils talk about lighting and that. The whole point of people going out into the countryside is have quiet without any lights in the sense what they call it. Actually, you can see the stars without being through the dusk clouds and whatever and XX lighting. So that's the whole point of having these campsites away from habitation in a sense, so they can enjoy the countryside. So really, I say, Mr. Chairman, I have no problem with it, and I move the application. Thank you.
Change your mind. I'll take Councillor Holland as well.
Thank you for your indulgence, Chair. I always get very excited when the Highways Authority says anything other than we have no objections. But do I understand correctly that our officers have received that objection from the Highways Authority that's really quite clear? It says, we don't think this should happen. And they've said, oh, we reckon differently. And I understand they'll have done so with a great deal of expertise behind it. But have I correctly summated what has happened, that the Highways Authority has commented and we have 100% discounted what the Highways Authority said? Now, they are the Highways Authority. And in connection with that, could I ask to see a photograph, please, of the access point at which Park Lane it has a junction with this access road? And is it possible for us to see the visibility splay that we are conditioning into the application as well? Thank you.
We've fully considered the highway comments. We haven't disregarded them. We fully considered them, and we've come to an alternative judgment or a different view in recommending granting planning permission. We've been along Park Lane, that it is narrow in places. There are grass verges at either side. It is possible at certain points for two cars to pass. There are, where it is narrow, there are passing places along on the line, along the road, and as officers, we didn't feel that we could substantiate a reason for refusal on highway grounds. It is a 60-mile-an-hour road. It is narrow. The geometry of that road would automatically reduce the speeds that vehicles will travel along the road. Again, taking care of addressing a highway safety issue, and speeds would be below, we anticipate, below 30 miles an hour along Park Lane.
Any response to the other questions from?
So if I just scroll down there, where's it go? This is Park Lane. Then you can see obviously there's vehicles utilising this point here. There's passing place. There's space here for vehicles to pass. Yeah.
Excuse me, you're not allowed to join in the debate.
That's actually their
Yeah.
driveway, Chair.
That's the junction, yeah. That's the junction to the access. And again, vehicle parked and another vehicle can get past. And grass verges either side. And again, another places for cars to pass.
Does that satisfy your questions, councillors? Councillor Crisp.
It's been running, it runs for 1 month a year. Are you expecting I mean, it's not expanding at all, is it? I suppose is the question. And are you expecting the same flow of people coming in and out on those extra months?
An additional 3 months where the campsite would be available for use, and we wouldn't anticipate that the monthly visitors to increase over. Same, yeah, and then obviously there's a campsite working in operation at the moment in addition to a farm shop. And then obviously you've got the educational facilities as well that have been utilised by the site. And as far as we're aware, there's no highway issue as a result of those operations being used.
Thank you. Being as this is unusual evening where we've progressed through the hours, at this point, I'd like to know your views in terms of, it doesn't look like we're going to be finished for 10 o'clock. Would members be agreeable to an extra extension of half an hour to conclude business? Take that as moved. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to officers for the photograph and for their answer to the previous question. I understand, following on from what Councillor Crisp said, the applicant is currently using their permitted development rights to operate as a campsite for 1 month a year. Can our officers tell us, does that include the use of camper vans, or is it tents only at the moment? Because one of the things that's changed in between the initial recommendations on the report and the supplementary report is that we're now being asked to approve camper vans, which are a larger, different category of vehicle and would place additional strain on this particularly narrow, as we've seen, country paths. There's a difference between cars with perhaps a roof rack and a bicycle and a tent on it and camper vans of up to 6 meters. I understand that our officers take a different view from the highways experts at the Highways Authority about the safety of vehicles up to 6 meters. But we don't, as a local planning authority, have the ability to prevent people with trailers from accessing the land. And indeed, the agricultural vehicles that use the pathway at the moment will inevitably be articulated, I would have thought. People are dragging stuff behind them. So I'm conscious of the highway safety issue, but are we, in the proposals that have been put in front of us in the officers' recommendations, are we permitting a category of use that is not currently permitted under permitted development rights?
Over to officers.
One moment, please. The permitted development right does include camper vans as movable structures.
Councillor Gould.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sorry to keep on about the Highways Authority, but I do think it's absolutely crucial when considering this application. Can I get this straight? So the Highways Authority, are they aware of the sort of passing places that have been identified and still maintain their objection, even though this evidence has been sort of brought to their attention? I do have a second question, Chair, and that's about the SSSI. And the risk to that. We're told in the report there isn't a risk, but I am a bit concerned because what's going to obviously happen is that an awful lot more people are going to be coming onto this site. Instead of 1 month a year, 3 times a year. We've been told in the supplementary report there's going to be sort of camper vans. And I just wonder, is it, when we arrive, or when the officers have arrived at the decision, there is no risk, how actually have they arrived at that? Because the such circumstances suggest that there could be a threat, and I'm just interested what sort of risk assessment was made to arrive at the decision. Well, there is no risk if this application is approved.
Question, Councillor Gould. Go to officers.
That just in terms of highways, yes, they are aware of the passing places along Park Lane, and they did request passing places along the access. Passing places along the access have been provided as they requested, and obviously Park Lane there are passing places which the Highway Authority report notes, but they still maintain that obviously their objection, primarily because it's an isolated location, but isolated locations are generally used for campsites, generally rural in nature. Campsites that are rural in nature can only go where it's rural and countryside. In terms of the impact on the SSSI, obviously we consider the use. It's 4 months in a calendar year. The number of vehicles likely to arrive, people attending at any one time. There's no development actually in the SSSI itself. It's all outside. There is a boundary between the site and the SSSI, so we do take all that into consideration in formulating our view and judgment.
So for avoidance of doubt then, the Highways Agency are aware of the passing places proposal, but are still against this application.
Yes, the Highway Authorities are aware of Park Lane and the passing places along Park Lane, and obviously the passing places on the site access.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers? Councillor Panther.
Thank you, Chair. I'm still have concerns about the lighting, but what I'd like clarification on is it said for 4 months of the year. Do we know what months are being proposed to be used?
We do. It's been described June through to September.
December, if you're right.
And I think in response to your lighting question, Councillor Panther, I think there's probably an element that that wouldn't be acceptable in this location of additional lighting, as Councillor Williams has alluded to.
It can't be additional lighting because there is none.
Councillor Fear.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Like Councillor Williams, I'm broadly happy with this application. I mean, campsites, I spent many years of my youth on campsites, and they were always in out of the way locations. That is the nature of the beast. Lighting, well, these are the brightest months of the year. So, I mean, again, I think, when we look at that, again, is not a particularly significant thing. Where I think this report has fallen down a little bit, frankly, is when we look at the map that we're given, We are only given really the access road. We're not given the public highway road, nor are we able in that regard to form a judgment as regards these passing places. I mean, one of the things that interests me is, as has already been alluded to in this debate, the presence of camper vans. Now, squeezing a car into a passing place is one thing. Squeezing a camper van into a passing place is quite a different thing. There's also, of course, an argument about the weight of these vehicles and the damage that they could do to the road in that regard. However, on the other side, I note the comments about school parties going here. So one assumes that they're going in at least a minibus, which is sort of equivalent to the camper van. And in that regard, I genuinely don't really see a problem with this. Although I for the future, I think it is important to present visual material correctly. And here I would very much have liked to have seen Park Lane with the passing places marked out for us to have a look at, to form some sort of judgment as to whether, you know, they're all bunched together or they're evenly spaced or however it's done, so that we can think about traffic flow. So that's my only worry about this. I mean, issues of lighting, I think it looked, when I looked at the junction, I think this committee has approved displays which are worse than that, quite frankly. So broadly speaking, I'm inclined to look with favour on this application.
Councillor Fear, are you suggesting the possibility of a site visit?
I don't think a site visit is necessary, Mr. Chairman, although if you were to propose deferral so that we got a map and photographs of the relevant part or passing places, perhaps that would be something that would satisfy everyone. I don't know.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Councillor Fear. The photographs that that Scott showed were of Park Lane, not the driveway to the campsite. So I think you alluded to the fact that those photographs were of the driveway, unless I've misunderstood.
No, I'm afraid you did, but that's probably my fore expression of that. I mean, as I say, my interest is in the size of them and their distribution, and I didn't see that on the diagram. That was the problem. But broadly speaking, my inclination, one question I would ask is, how long is the drive from Park Lane to a larger highway, to get some sort of sense of that? It's really the map that's been given us doesn't look particularly good in terms of forming a rounded decision.
Perhaps if we could pull up a Google Maps, you can quite clearly see that the driveway is sufficient of certain length, and then the Park Lane is another length, which will highlight. Straight, that's what we're looking for. The stick man doesn't stick on the road, so I don't think Google. Yeah. Well, no, that's how it's not been visited by Google. That doesn't mean say it's narrow. Let's not.
And then junction of Park Lane, Bloor Lane. It's a passing place.
That looks like quite a good one. That's, you know, some of the ones we saw were sort of grassy
And then there's another one here for the access. There's one here on the corner. There's another one here. There's another one here. Then obviously the highway gets wider. There's 2 tankers. Oh, the access is further up. There's another one here.
Excuse me, you're not allowed to interfere with the proceedings. You've said your point. You can't argue with the members. I'm sorry.
There's another passing place here. There's another passing place here. And then the site access is here.
Right. Can we measure from there up to the front?
471 metres from the junction of Park Lane to the Park Hill Farm.
Councillor Fear, are you content with that information?
I fear I'm not, Mr. Chairman. I mean, the most important, I'm not very interested, in fact, in the access road as such. I mean, the more important is the highway. What I don't have is information of how long that highway is back again. The fact there are tankers there inclines me to think that this is a reasonable decision to make. But I don't know whether I've got support from this. I mean, part of me says we should defer this until we get a proper set of graphic information to think about it, because at the moment we're doing stuff on the hoof as I see it, and I would like some stuff about distance. I would like some stuff about what those passing places are like. As I say, I'm not hostile to this application, but I am, like Councillor Horan, wary of simply discounting the Highways Authority, and I would like a little bit more information to base my judgment on.
Thank you for that point, Councillor Fear. Do members wish to support Councillor Fear's? Okay. I think we're going to want a bit more. So the proposal is that we defer this application on the proviso that we need more graphical information, more information on exact distances, widths of road, etc. The amount of passing places in terms of the dimensions, and proposals for further passing places to be able to determine this.
Could I say, Mr. Chairman, as well, I mean, I think it'd be very useful and helpful for committee members if we knew how many of those passing places, like the first one, seem to be metalled, and how many of them are informal.
Thank you, Councillor Fear. So Councillor Fear has proposed that. And we have a seconder. Councillor Panther. Yeah. Thank you. Would we vote on that, please? And a show of hands on the condition that members may like to go and visit the site themselves, should they be inclined to be in that part of the world to satisfy their own curiosity as well. So a proposal to defer has been made and seconded. Can I have a show of hands, please, in support of that? And that's unanimous. Thank you. The item is deferred. Okay, brings us to the next item on the agenda. And I believe we've got a very short presentation on this application.
Chair. This application seeks approval of the plans and specifications under Schedule 17 of the High Speed Rail West Midlands Crew Act 2021 for a watercourse crossing, fences, walls and earthworks for the creation of 2 ecological mitigation ponds and bunds required to support associated works on site on land to the north of west of Borough End Farm. In passing the Act, Parliament has judged such impacts to be acceptable when set against the benefits to be achieved by the Phase 2A scheme. The schedule sets out that the council can only refuse to approve the application or impose conditions in certain circumstances. These circumstances are set out in detail in the main agenda report. The proposed works preserve the local environment and local amenity, do not result in any prejudicial effect on road safety or on the free flow of traffic in the local area, and would not adversely affect a site of archaeological or historic interest or nature conservation value. As such, there are no design and appearance reasons to refuse to approve the application or grounds to argue that the development ought to and could reasonably be carried out on other land. I've got a plan of the land. So this is the red edge defines the area in question where these works will be carried out. Madeley Village is further towards the east off the plan, and that demonstrates the secluded location of the site where the works will be proposed. This plan here shows in greater detail the works being proposed. So as you can see here, you can see the ponds, the bunds, and there's a water course crossing which will allow vehicles to cross over that. I believe it's a ditch, and that's everything from me for now. Thank you, Chair.
For that, Nick, I'll pass it over to members. Councillor Panter.
Yeah, I live in this particular area, so it's somewhat familiar to me. I see no real objection to what they're doing, especially for it can enhance the ecological situation. I'm just a little surprised that there's been no comment from Madeley Parish Council or even anyone from the council here to speak on the matter. But I would, no objection, and in fact, I would propose it.
The Panter. Councillor Williams. Councillor Williams, I'll endeavour with officers to at least provide you with an alternative array of pictures in future. Thank you. Councillor Panter.
Chair, this lies a reasonable distance away from any main housing estates at all. I can't see it interrupting it at all. It's well, I can't see no reason for any sort of objection to this matter whatsoever, and I stand by what I said earlier.
Councillor Panter, we have your proposal. Councillor Holland.
Seconded. HS2 is the devil railway, but it's been outlined to us that we can't object to this except on very, very specific grounds. So we're not going to do so. I move the recommendations. I second what Councillor Panter has proposed.
Thank you for that, Councillor Holland. So it's been moved and seconded for recommendation to allow. Can I have a show of hands, please, to support that or not? Councillor Moffat. All but 2 on that one. Thank you very much, councillors. Moves us to item number 8 on the agenda, 5 Boggs Cottages, Keele. Do we have an update on that?
Thank you, Chair. We're still awaiting the appeal decision from the planning inspectorate. We were told at the hearing that it is likely to be mid-October. So it's the 11th of October now. So hopefully in the next week or 2, we should receive that decision. But there's nothing further from me to report tonight. Thank you.
Can we be notified when the time and date of that hearing? Will we be able to go to it?
The hearing happened on the 7th of September. We're waiting for we're just waiting for the inspector's decision now.
Thank you. Are members content to bring this back in the next but 1 meeting in the future? Thank you. Item 9, land at Doddersport, Betley. Do you have an update on that?
Thank you, Chair. There's nothing further to report. The position remains as set out in the main agenda report. I'm the officer dealing with this case, and I will be visiting again in October. The only other comment that I would make is that I have been in discussion with the landowner recently this week. So communication is live with the owner, but my next step is to carry out a further site visit to see what the latest status of the land is and whether he's still complying with his planning conditions of that latest planning permission. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that update, Nick. That's appreciated. Same as the last application, are members content to bring this back next but 1 meeting? Thank you. Brings us to item 10 on the agenda, land north of Pepper Street, Keele. Do we have an update on that?
Yeah, just really to summarise what's in the agenda report, that this site was granted consent several years ago now, and there was a section 106 that was signed with the planning permission, and as part of the original scheme, they made an argument that it wasn't viable to provide, amongst other things, affordable housing. And there was a requirement within the section 106 that if no substantial commencement of development had been made within a specified time period, then they would have to do another viability appraisal. So it's been to committee 3 times previously to extend that period, really primarily on the basis of COVID, and the impact that that's had on their ability to commence on site. And this is a further request to extend the period until until March 2023. And on the basis that they're saying that works have been delayed due to the impact that COVID has had on construction. The applicant is in the process of discharging a number of pre-commencement conditions, which I can confirm that they are doing, but more time is required to complete that process. So your officer's view is that in acknowledgement of the impacts of the COVID pandemic, and the fact that the government is encouraging local planning authorities to be flexible, we're recommending that members agree this additional extension of time.
I'm not really happy about these continued recommendations. I think we need to send the message out that you know, there's only a finite time that we're prepared to do this. But members, would you like to debate this, or are you happy for me to propose that this recommendation goes through, obviously in lieu of a seconder? Councillor Fear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I share your worries about this. I think, given the circumstances we're in, we should probably vote this through tonight. But I think perhaps we should attach a note saying "thus far and no further." These COVID excuses are getting a bit old now, to be honest. And I think, it is becoming simply an excuse rather than a valid reason. So I'm happy to go with this, but I would like this very firmly to be the last one.
You, Councillor Fear. Okay, it's been proposed from the chair and seconded by Councillor Fear. Can I see a show of hands, please, in response to that? And that's unanimous. Thank you. We're nearly there, folks. Item 11, a tree preservation order, 32 the Village Keel. You have a presentation? No presentation on that, so over to members.
Save the tree, Mr. Chairman, move it.
Quite hear that. Who's proposing that then? Councillor Fear proposing. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Williams. Well done. Can we show of hands, please, in terms of that recommendation? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much, members. Brings us on to item 12, urgent business. I haven't got any urgent business. Are you aware of any urgent business? There's no urgent business. So that just leaves me to say thank you very much for your patience and for sticking throughout this evening's proceedings. And we got there in the end. And this is a very rare occasion where we've gone beyond 10 o'clock. Not that we want to make this a rule, but thank you very much for your indulgence and perseverance. And thanks very much for the press for sticking it out to the end. Thank you. Have a safe journey home. This item's closed.